Morning, everybody. Welcome to our virtual town hall meeting. This is episode 4. So thank you all so much for joining. I know a few more folks are joining as we speak, but it's 10 o'clock on the dot. So we'll go ahead and get started. Again, welcome to episode 4. Today's episode is the keys to safety and compliance. I am honored to have our VP of Safety, Mr. Tim Hutchings. Tim, would you like to introduce yourself to everybody?
Sure. Thank you, Michael. Appreciate the opportunity. Tim Hutchings, VP of Safety. A lot of drivers who are listening may not have met me yet. So I'm going on about a year and a half, almost 2 years. So a lot of you drivers have been here before I got here. So, I apologize we haven't met, but maybe that's a good thing, so far. But, glad to be here. Glad for the opportunity to take a few minutes this morning and share some things that I feel is very, very beneficial and helpful in daily driving strategies we'll talk about here in a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Well, thanks, Tim. I appreciate you joining. And, a lot of preparation goes into these episodes. So thanks so much for your time. And, for anybody on the call, if you missed any of our previous episodes, 1, 2, or 3, they're available on YouTube. So definitely go check out the WFX YouTube to view those. Otherwise, we'll jump into it. So, Tim, you and I sat down when we were kind of putting this episode together, and we landed on the keys to safety and compliance because those are kind of one and the same, right? So we're going to be talking through those, but you shared with me a theory, or maybe theory isn't the best way to say it, but more or less kind of your Bible to safety. So let's jump into that.
Sure. So back up just a minute, Michael.
Sure.
I was like other drivers, I've got my start driving a truck, right? So was able to spend about 10 or 12 years on the road. And I've took what I learned as a driver. Once I became in the office and I started working full-time safety, full-time safety dedicated since about 2006. So I've been at this for a while. And I'm able to take what I applied as a driver and then evaluate what I do as a safety director, VP level, manager, however you want to title it, and see things that happen out on the roadway. I came up with this philosophy, as you say, right, or a theory. And it is, if you're able to see the screen, you'll see right here. It's not that we train drivers here how to drive a truck, right? We only hire qualified drivers and contractors who have the experience and who pass our requirements from a safety standpoint. And then we road test everybody who comes through. So we know that they know how to drive the truck. We're not a driving school provider carrier, so we don't teach that. But when we talk about driving a CMV and operating commercial vehicles, there's things that you can do as a driver and a contractor that's going to protect yourself, right? That's going to continue or let you be a safe operator of that equipment. And one of those things is, your behavior habits. What are you actually doing on the road that people are actually observing? Because everybody's watching, whether it's the general motoring public around your vehicle while you're moving down the road, whether it's customers. We heard that with John's story, and we heard that with Jason and Gilbert about customers having scorecards. So they see your on-time deliveries, they see your late deliveries. Customers watch you, right? We know DOT watches. That's what they get paid to do, is monitor our behaviors and driving habits out on the road. So we know they're watching as well. And we know insurance watches from a risk factor standpoint.
Yep.
So we're going to talk about some of that stuff and how all that relates to this in a little while. But so what we want to do is focus on your behavior habits while you're driving that CMV. And one way to focus on that as a driver or a contractor is make sure your behavior habits are exhibiting these three C's that I call, that you're being courteous, you're being cautious, and you're being compliant. And we'll look at each one of those and give some examples and break these down just a little bit more to give you some background in what you can do to represent yourself as being a safe operator.
Excellent. I love it. The three C's. It's easy to remember: courteous, cautious, compliant. So let's dive into the first one here.
Great. So courteous, you know, this is probably the hardest one for drivers and contractors for us to do because so many people do not pay attention to driving when they're driving anymore, right? We have this device called the smartphone that works anywhere at any time, right? So, and we see this huge distraction in other vehicles, and unfortunately, some of the times that's even with other commercial drivers, right? Being
Mhm.
on their phone, being on a handheld device, streaming live stream, or FaceTime, or watching a movie while they're driving. So, when we talk about being courteous, and we see other people's behavior habits of not being courteous, it's hard to respect those other people, right? When they're not paying attention.
Mhm.
And I always tell the class this in orientation: you got one road to share. Wherever you are at that particular mile marker, place, or point, what kind of road you're on, 2 lane, divided 4 lane, multiple lane interstate, you have to respect the other motorists around you. Whether they're earning that respect or not, you know, you have to. So when we talk about respect, we can do that in ways like our slide says here, making sure we're signaling for lane changes, make sure we're, got us merging smoothly in and out of the interstate or on the interstate or off of interstate exit. And we see this all the time when a car will try to switch 4 lanes to take an exit. And unfortunately, sometimes that doesn't always work out for the car, right? They don't
Mhm.
pay attention, right? Maintain a safe following distance. Those are things that we end up showing respect for other motorists, right? And some of those, like I said, the communication part, using your turn signals, make sure your headlights are on if the sun's not out. If people forget about that dusk and dawn, need your headlights on. This morning was not a bright sunny day, but the sun was behind the clouds when I was coming in this morning. So, I've naturally turned my headlights on. Didn't really need it. I had all interstate traffic was going the same direction, but that way, if somebody's looking for vehicles in their side mirrors or rearview mirror in a car, right, they'll see my headlights. So think about those things. That's an easy communication device, right? Um, Hazard lights or emergency lights or four ways if there's a problem and you can communicate to somebody else very clearly, right? Those are just part of being courteous. And then, you know, avoid aggressive driving, right? An aggressive driver is not being courteous whatsoever, right? You need to drive more defensively, and we'll talk about that in the next point here of being cautious.
Mhm. Yeah, I think you're spot on, Tim, that this one is likely the most difficult of the three C's, and the reason why is because it's pretty much all emotion based, right? Or maybe not all of it, but certainly some of it. And sometimes it's easy to let your emotions get the better of you, particularly while you're driving, particularly while if you're having a tough day, or you got some things going on at home, or whatever it is. So I definitely agree with you there that this one's probably the most difficult one. Well, great. So courteous, right? So let's go to the next one.
Courteous. Yep. Yep. Cautious and just the opposite of aggressive driving, right? Defensive driving, like I said, right? And here's what I tell drivers: as a solo driver, you're doing 120 to 150,000 miles a year. So the risk factor of something happen is a lot greater than me and my personal vehicle doing 20,000 miles a year, right? You're tripling that time on the highway.
Mm-hmm.
So the risk factors there, you have to drive defensively, you know. And I tell them, expect the unexpected, right? You can pay attention to the traffic around you, but as drivers will tell you, they pretty much see when somebody's not paying attention to driving, where there's a distraction in the vehicle, they're arguing with a spouse, they're on a cell phone, they got a carload full of kids or something, right? There's a bit always distractions. And you know, drivers can tell you, hey, I need to get away from this situation. I don't feel comfortable. I don't like this, right? So you can always slow down and get away from it. And then if somebody is driving aggressively around you, you can get away from them as well. That means you have to take the next exit and take a break or walk around after you stop, or maybe a rest area you weren't scheduled to pull in, but you want to get away from that road rage situation or potential situation. Then, you know, get away from that, right? Um, Knowing your road hazards. If you see a vehicle broke down on the shoulder of the road on the interstate, or maybe they're not all the way out of the road, maybe they're still in your lane a little bit, you know, give them some space if you can, or slow down if you can. You know, there's things like that you could pay attention to if you're paying attention, right? If you're you know, driving defensively, you'll see these things, right?
Yeah.
Anticipate sudden stops. You know, this is a big one, especially when school comes back into play after they kids have been out all summer, and school bus traffic will pick back up. And you know, not all of our driving is interstate driving. So when we're on some state highways and going from one small town to another to get back to a major thoroughfare or interstate, we'll come across a bus stop, right? Or we'll see signs of warnings of a school bus stop ahead. So pay attention, even rural mail carriers, right? Some of these rural routes on state highways, the mail carrier doesn't come all the way off of the roadway. They're still halfway in your travel lane. So pay attention to those things by being alert and being cautious. It's definitely a plus.
That's great. So we got courteous, we got cautious, and now everyone's favorite one, right?
Right. Yeah, compliant, right? When I said being courteous is probably the hardest one to do, because other people don't pay attention and they make us be short patient with them. Um, Being compliant should be the easiest one to do by all means, right? And it's real simple. It's just following the rules of the road. And when I mean rules of the road, it's what's posted on the side of the road. If your speed limit's 65, your maximum speed should not exceed 65. If you're in a area like, you know, I'm from Atlanta. Atlanta's notorious for no trucks in the left two lanes out of five around Atlanta, around their whole bypass, the 285. And you cannot be in those left two lanes. And there's signs that says no trucks in the left two lanes. And I tell the class this every single week. And every single week, I get a violation on a roadside inspection where I got an improper lane, right? There's a truck in the improper lane, one of those left two lanes. And here's the thing with that. Usually you'll get a violation for an improper lane, and you also get a violation for failure to obey traffic control sign or device, right? And a lot of times that also comes with a speeding violation, because the driver was in a hurry to get out of that lane to get
Right.
back where they know they were supposed to be to begin with. And if they don't use a turn indicator to communicate what they're doing, there's another violation, right? And so when we get into compliance, if the officer's really having his way with the driver, right, and he's going through every single paper and every single log for the day in the last 8 days, he may find more violations when we talk about hours of service violations, right? Being compliant with those regulations, you know. a driver was in a hurry and he didn't put his trailer number down, or he didn't put a bill lading information in on a previous 8-day. And if he didn't do that for 7 days, that's 7 different violations. So you took a potential one violation for being in the improper lane and you just turned it into 7, 11. You went from a 7-point violation to 60 points violations, right?
Mm-hmm.
So all the violations are weighted by points, and all the violations found on any roadside inspection, right, ends up coming back in our CSA score, and it affects that as well as the driver's PSP score. And we'll talk about some of those a little bit in a little bit as well. So how do you reduce those negative roadside inspections or reduce roadside inspections with violations? Be compliant. Do what the signs on the road are telling you to do. If it tells you there's a construction zone ahead and it tells you to reduce your speed, it's a posted construction zone. And the speed limit gets reduced, whether there's workers in the construction zone or not. It's still a construction zone, and the speed has to be, followed. And sometimes it'll tell you all commercial trucks must use the right lane for the next 6 miles, or however long that construction zone is. And if that posted speed limit in that construction zone goes down to 50 miles an hour, and you get behind another commercial vehicle who's struggling to do 50 miles an hour, well, now you're doing 40 miles an hour, right? Well, that doesn't mean you get a pass that you can get in the left lane and pass this guy, even though you may not exceed the posted construction zone speed limit, you still cannot be in that other lane. So you get an option of being caught either way. So,
Yeah.
Following road signs, they're there for a reason. They don't just put them up just to put them up, right? They're there because they mean something. We see a lot of, let's say, U.S. highways that'll come into a populated area. Yeah, it may be 65 miles an hour on a divided 4-lane with a grass median, but as you come in a populated area, they're going to give you a reduced speed ahead sign, and it'll bring you down to 55. Then you'll get another reduced speed sign down to 45, and sometimes you'll come down to 35, depending on how heavy populated that little city or community is, how heavy the traffic flow is going to be, and if it's coming through a small community or town, right? If there's a lot of side entrances, roads, driveways, parking lots, things like that. So those signs mean something, and those signs are there to protect you, the driver, and the other motoring public as well. So it's important to be compliant. I could go on and on and on about it, but those are just a few, that I could say, and we'll talk about some more of those in a little bit and how they relate. But, it's pretty easy, I should say, to be compliant if you want to be compliant, right?
Yeah,
So
I love the way you say that, Tim, because it's easy to look at everything that a driver or contractor has to do to be compliant and be a bit overwhelmed, right? I mean, you have everything from the traffic laws, like you talked about, the FMCSA rulings, the hours of service, right? I mean, there's just so much maintenance of their truck, right? All those things. And so it's easy to be, overwhelmed and discouraged. But, something you and I talked about while we were preparing for this is, being regimented and being disciplined, right? Being disciplined with your pre-trips, being disciplined with your post-trips, being disciplined with your maintenance, also your trip planning, which was episode 3. We talked to Rob about that. Communicating with operations, right? Which was, our first episode there, with John Story. And, I think a lot of what you're saying kind of relates to this is that, we all have skin in the game, right? The company has skin in the game. The drivers and contractors have skin in the game, especially when it comes to being compliant, right? Because if somebody gets a violation, right, that goes on the driver or the contractor, and it goes on us, right? It goes against the company as well. So, we all have skin in the game, is really my point here, as it relates to compliance.
it is, and I say this about compliance. All the roadside inspections, affect our CSA score, both clean and bad. When I say bad, bad ones meaning a violation was found on that inspection. Those bad inspections actually make and create our CSA score, which is our safety scorecard that the FMCSA looks at every month, and they watch it and monitor it every month, and they release the facts back to us every month, and we can go in and we see that score, right? And the thing that with when I said everybody's watching, it's not just the DOT officers on the highway watching the behavior habits of our trucks, it's the federal government's watching. And if they don't like what they see in our CSA score, or they see numbers above the threshold or out of compliance in an area they feel like we don't have a control on, they're going to come in and do a DOT audit on us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they're going to look at everything that, one, we have to do as a motor carrier to be compliant. Because what our drivers have to do to be compliant and contractors have to do to be compliant on the roadway, we have a list of things here in the safety department we have to do to be compliant also. And that starts a simple application process. The application is even regulated by what it has to have, what kind of, experience is there, what we have to
Mm-hmm.
verify that experience on,
Yep.
all those things, right? So it all starts with an application. It starts way before we ever hire and make a decision to hire, right, a driver or a contractor. So it does make a big difference, and it does affect the company as a whole in a lot of areas. And, fortunately or unfortunately, that's why we have company policies, right? We have those things for check and balances and accountability, right? And that accountability is going to hold what? One, us, the motor carrier, compliant and accountable to the federal regulations, and also hold that driver accountable for his activity and safe operation of his equipment.
Yeah, well said. The final point I think I'll put on this one um, is kind of bringing in our episode 2, right, that we did with Gilbert and Jason around the importance of customer service. Is not just the federal government are looking at our CSA scores, but our customers are as well. And the even if the customer is interested in our services and what we have to offer, and it's a good fit for the network, and we're all excited about the business, if they are looking closely at our safety record, they may not verify, or confirm that we can haul their freight, right? So, again, back to skin in the game, right? We all have skin in the game with regards to compliance, and so I think this was a great seat.
Yeah, customers want to make sure they can get their product to their customers or the market, so to speak, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if they're looking at an hours of service heavy outside the threshold of compliance and out of service, and we have trucks shut down for out of service issues, some of their freight is time sensitive when we talk about fresh protein loads, right? That are fresh and not frozen. The shelf life on some of that stuff is extremely short. We talk about organic produce, we talk about the pharmaceuticals, and we talk about, like I said, some protein. Some of that shelf life for fresh is really, really short. And if they can't trust us, or we can't show on our CSA score that we're compliant in that, they may not give us that freight, or
Yep.
the frequency of that freight will be much lower than what it could possibly be. Excuse me.
Right.
So yeah, very important.
Yep. Good point. Well, I hope everyone can remember these 3 C's: courteous, cautious, and compliant. Tim, I think that this is great. It's easy to remember, and I appreciate you sharing all this with us. So let's move on a little bit.
Sure.
Let's dive in a little bit to preventability, and I know you have some numbers that we want to look at, which I think will be really interesting. I was super interested in them because it's not safety numbers that I typically see. So let's talk about preventability a little bit.
Sure. So, when we talk about the 3 C's of safety, courteous, cautious, and compliant, you can be all of those things and you can exhibit those behavior habits, but that doesn't mean you won't be involved in an accident, right? Like I said, the risk factor is there. You're driving a lot of miles, So the opportunity's there, right? What we really want to see, if something does happen, we'll deal with it, and we'll take it to the end that it has to go to. What we want to see is those things to be non-preventable, right?
Yeah.
So what we don't want to see is them to be preventable, meaning, did you not, were you tailgating? Were you speeding? Could things like that, those unsafe behaviors, could have been a factor in a preventable accident, right? Were you at fault because of one of those things you were not doing? So preventability, is just exactly what it says. It could have been prevented. How could it have been prevented? Or what could have been done different for it not to be prevented, right? So that's what we have to evaluate when we look at incidents and accidents. We're always looking at that preventability factor. And
Yep.
sometimes that evaluation of preventability is quick and easy to see. We just automatically know. And then sometimes it really takes a lot of research, and it takes a lot of time and investigation and asking a lot of questions to our driver to get their statement of what happened, right?
Hmm.
And if we have the option to review dash camera footage before it happened, right? Before the incident occurred, what was going on? Was there a distraction by our driver? Maybe they were looking at their cell phone. I hate to say it, but it happens sometimes, right? They take their eyes off the road for too long, and all of a sudden, traffic's slowing down or stopping in front of them, you know? So things can happen. We have to evaluate those when we look at all accidents and incidents to try to determine preventability or not.
Hmm. Yeah, I had another safety professional kind of explain it to me like this when I was pretty early in my career in trucking, and they said a lot of the times as it relates to lawsuits and things like that, that it is 9 times out of 10 everybody is always trying to pin whatever the situation was on the professional driver. The reason being because they're a professional, right? They are a professional driver. Everybody else is just kind of the motoring public, right? And so, you know, people are constantly coming after drivers, contractors, trucking companies, from a legality standpoint. And so,
Yeah,
I
just
think, right? I mean, I don't know. What do you kind of agree with that?
yeah, you're gonna get me on a soapbox here in a minute, right? So there's not an interstate filled with a billboard that's not advertising a plaintiff lawyer that wants to come after a trucking company, right?
Exactly.
They're coming. We know they're coming. And the accident can be a non-preventable, and we still get sued on it, right? And here's why they do it. The first thing they try to do when they come after a trucking company is they're going to look for a negligent hire. Was that driver qualified? Should have he been behind the wheel? Did you do all the things the FMCSA says you're supposed to do to be compliant as a motor carrier to make sure you vetted that employer, potential employer driver out well enough to know, yes, you made a proper decision to put him in a truck. So negligent hire is the first thing, and training is the second thing. They figure they can trip you up on one of those two things. If they can put any doubt into a jury, right, that driver shouldn't have been driving or wasn't a safe driver because you didn't train them properly, then they have an opportunity, right, to potentially, you know, lead to a settlement in their favor.
Mhm.
So, unfortunately, right, the things we do in safety, we do based off preparation for litigation. Whether it goes that way or not, we have to ask those questions. We have to capture this information. We have to vet the drivers. And when we do, driver approval for hiring, we go through this process and we look at a driver's PSP report, which is basically a list of all their site violations, roadside inspections, and accidents that they had for the previous 2 years before they join us. So if we see a pattern of unsafe driving, or we see a pattern of heavy violations for, we'll just say hours of service, they're running over their hours, do we want to hire that driver. Is that applicant going to be qualified to drive with us if they have that pattern, right?
Right.
Because we don't want to, bring their problems on with us, right? So I had a safety guy one time said, you hire 90% of your own problems. And
Mm.
so, you have to look at that and evaluate that. And that's why we do screen them. Recruiting recruits them. They get them into the door on the paperwork. And then we go through and we vet them on approval process. So all that stuff means something, right?
Yeah.
And yes, it's hard when we're telling the recruiter, hey, you need to find a better qualified applicant, or this one did not qualify, and it puts a lot of pressure on our recruiting team. And, we have a good relationship, safety and recruiting. We have to work well together because our common goal is to, keep our trucks full to keep everything moving, right? So that's what we're in the business for. So it is a balance and sometimes a fine line.
Very good. Well, let's dive into some details here.
Sure. Great. So here's some numbers I put up on preventability and non-preventability. This is 2024 year-to-date captured information. Out of all incidents and accidents combined, whether it's a minor, hey, I was turning around in a tight spot on this guy's yard where I was delivering and my trailer swung and hit a dumpster, or we hit a parked utility trailer, or hey, I was doing a blind side back, it's the only way I can get in here, and my trailer hit the trailer next to me. So some of those are preventable, but they're minor incidents, right? And some of these may be major accidents or DOT recordable accidents as well. But overall, what this graph shows is 48% are preventable. So it's less than 50%. It's not an impressive number by no means, right? That number should be 20% or less in a perfect world. Should be zero, actually. You should never have a preventable.
Right.
But, you manage what you have, right? Because you can't monitor or manage something you can't measure. So here's our measurement. So this gives us a place to start with, right, when we're looking at these things. But on the good side of this, 52% of every incident and accident we've occurred this year are non-preventable, meaning it's not our fault. It happened. It may be a simple backing accident at a truck stop. Somebody misjudged something and they backed into us. That's a non-preventable, right?
Right.
So it's not the prettiest number, but it could be worse. So
very good.
That's played in our favor.
Yeah. Well, let's keep cooking here. So talk to me about this. So third-party adjusters kind of versus internal. So what is this showing us?
Yeah. So here's a percentage graph that shows we use outside claims companies, right? A TPA, they call them, third-party adjusters. So it just, you don't know this by looking at it, but I'll explain it. The CBCS is a company that handles all of our liability claims, meaning claims where we're at fault, claims that were preventable, claims that we caused maybe some property damage or physical damage, or maybe even an accident that has some bodily injury to it, right? So when we look at this graph, what we're looking at is all the accidents on that previous list, both preventable, non-preventable, and incidents. Only 15% of those go to our liability insurance carrier, basically, is what that's saying, right? 15% of them were at fault in. The SDI is the 40%. There are FISDAM, physical damage, third party who goes and retrieves money from an outside at-fault motor carrier or somebody who caused the accident, if it was an accident, right? So if a car is trying to beat our truck to a single lane in a construction zone and they don't make it and they clip our fender or our bumper and they cause us damage, then we turn this over to SDI. They contact the other party's insurance. we send our claim demand into them saying, hey, it's going to cost us X number of dollars to repair our truck or our vehicle. And that's where the 40% of the claims are.
Okay.
So the internal 45%, those are claims we handle in-house, and they may be small, minor claims, $300 here, $1,000 there. We try to rule of thumb that less than $5,000 we'll try to take care of internally if we can. Not that we couldn't use, CBCS to handle that, but just like any other insurance policy, whether it's your personal vehicle or whatever, if you keep the frequency rate down, right, when you go to renew your insurance, maybe you won't see a increase in premiums. So it's not always just looked at from a dollar factor, meaning how much did they pay out in liability? What is the frequency of your claims? How many do you have, right?
Right.
So if we can handle it internally and we know that it's a write one small check and that claim goes away, then we're done with that, right? So
Got it.
that's just how we handle third parties and handle internal ourselves.
Well, good. So do you have more than one person on your team, Tim, working on claims? What does that look like?
Yeah, so Ron Simpson works a lot of our claims with SDI and CBCS.
Hmm.
I work a lot with SDI as well, and CBCS not as much. And then Randy Timms is involved in every CBCS and SDI, third party adjuster claim as well.
Okay.
So that's my team. My other team members will actually do what we call first response calls. So if anytime anybody calls in with a issue, whether it's a minor incident or an accident, one of those people answering the phone will get the claim information and start the process. And then I try to push it to Ron to oversee, make sure
Hmm.
everything's captured correctly, or make some changes. I monitor some things and we'll go in and make some adjustments. Sometimes the information that comes in may come in from a driver's opinion instead of when we investigate it to be factual. And
Okay.
sometimes those changes are made after that.
Got it. Well, good. Well, this is great information. This is not something I've really ever seen. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. Let's move on to our next one. So we got 2024 classification here. Got a couple different acronyms. So go ahead and walk us through this one if you could, please.
Sure. So when we look at all these incidents and accidents, like I described in the previous slide, meaning is it a physical damage or is it a liability, right? Basically in those two categories, or do we handle it in-house? Either way, we take those and we break them down by what actually happened. So in this slide, you'll see 45% it's HBO, and that stands for hit by other. So if another vehicle hits us in whatever format that is, whether we're parked or whether we're moving, that's 45% of all those claims, preventable and non-preventable, that come in. 45% of those are hit by other vehicles.
Wow.
And so the HOV is hit other vehicles. So 22% is where we hit another vehicle.
Okay.
Whether there again, we hit them in a parking lot, at a truck stop, trying to back into a space we really couldn't fit in, or the driver wasn't paying attention, whatever happened, or whether that's on the roadway or we made an improper lane change and we bumped or clipped a vehicle next to us. Maybe it was in our blind spot, or maybe it was coming up too fast and we misjudged it, whatever the case may be. So 22% is where we hit the other vehicle. The HSO is hit stationary object.
Mm.
Fortunately or unfortunately, sometimes things happen where a driver's trying to, like I said earlier, maybe they're trying to back into a dock or a real tight area, and the shipper receiver has a bunch of pallets or have some piece of machinery stored out back behind the building, and we hit that yellow pole, or we hit, a parked trailer, they use them for storage. And that trailer may never roll on the highway. It may have been there for 25 years, but it's a fixed object, and we hit a
Mm.
stationary fixed object. So that's what that 19% is.
Okay.
And the 14% of other could be things like some one-off incidents like deer strikes, right, or animal strikes where there's damage to our vehicle. It could be things like, for example, maybe a single vehicle accident with a jackknife, right, where we had to get a tow, but we were able to drive ourselves away. Or maybe we can't. Maybe it's a single vehicle accident with a rollover and it has to go away. That's considered an other because it didn't hit a stationary object. Nobody hit us. We didn't hit anybody else. So that's what the 14% reveals.
Got it. Good. Well, thank you for that breakdown. Obviously, we would love to see, a lot of those percentages on the left hand side, right, decrease, as much as we can, and how do we do that? Being the three C's, right? Courteous,
Yeah,
cautious, and compliant.
goes
So,
it goes back to the theory, right?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, data's fantastic. And, what I love looking at are trends, right? So I think you put something together here where we can see some trends over a little bit of time. So let's dive into that.
Yeah. So here's a 3 year year over year for the first 5 months of this year in the previous 2 years, only because that's what I have data for May. I don't have June. We just not finished with June yet, so I don't have that collected yet. Um, and just if you're looking at the graph, if you can, I'll explain it as best I can here. So you'll see January year over year, it's pretty consistent about the, 65 to 70 count. When I say count, we count by total incidents in that time, in that monthly time period. So they're pretty consistent for the previous 3 years. And if you look at February, 22 was our lowest count at about 45. And then you'll see, 23 was closer to 75, and 24, came back down to about 60.
Hmm.
So if we look year over year from 24 to 23, we made a big improvement in January. And then we followed the same trend in March and in April and in May. So when we just compare this year to last, historically, our incident and accident percentage rate or count, total count has come down, which tells me drivers are focusing more on safe driving, right? Tells me that they're paying attention. We're having a lot less frequency count. We talked about the frequency earlier. So we do see some improvements over previous years, right? And hopefully this trend and this pattern will continue through the rest of the year. I feel that it will. I feel we have a good group of safe drivers out there right now. There again, things happen. They're going to happen. We know they're going to happen. It's just a matter of, you know, the severity of them, the frequency of them, the risk factors there, like I said a couple of times already. So we just monitor this, and I like the trend I see here for 24. That's a really good trend. Anytime you're better, you improve yourself this year over last year, you're going in the right direction.
Yeah, very good. Again, for anybody who's joining on the phone who can't see this, kind of the overview or the moral of the story here is that it's good to see, especially when you look at 23 versus 24, that outside of January being flat, we've seen a decrease month over month, February, March, April, and May, versus the previous year, which is good. Of course, we want to keep seeing those numbers go down, right? Tim, I bet you'd sleep a heck of a lot better, if those bars are closer to zero. But anybody on the call who can who can help us out in that regard is doing the right thing.
Correct.
Yep. Well, good. Well, so let's talk a little bit about safety culture. You mentioned, Tim, that you mentioned before that you have a large team, right, in safety, and their number one job is taking care of our fleet and our company, right?
Absolutely. I tell them, I guess if I have to compare to, let's say, customer service, our department compared to customer service. The drivers and contractors are our customers, right? We're
Hmm.
here to help them succeed. We're here to help them make sure they operate their trucks very safe, right? And if something happens, we need to know about it because we can help them maybe get out of the situation, resolve the situation, or, see what the next movement needs to be in that situation, whatever that is, right? And I put an emphasis on it being it, whatever it is, we can deal with it, but we have to know about it. So we ask them, hey, call us and tell us, somebody's in this safety office 24/7. We have coverage 24/7. Are my Is my weekend guy sometimes hard to get a hold of? Yeah, he's the only one here. And if he's real busy, he is. Is my nighttime guy hard to get a hold of? Sometimes he is. He's the only person here. So, if a lot of drivers are calling or if he's dealing with a pretty severe incident or accident at the time, then yeah, he's kind of preoccupied. But, they all get our after hour cell phone number. They can send a text or a message to, and if my guy's busy on the landline or communicating with another department on an issue, he'll get back with them. So, yes, we have plenty of staff here. We're always here to help, and when we talk about safety culture, safety gets a bad rap on that, right? Nobody just calls to check on Tim or Eric or Neil. Hey, just want to see how y'all doing today. No, they
Yeah.
don't call us, right?
Right.
And when we have to call them, their usually first response is, "What did I do?"
Right.
Right? Why are you calling me? Am I in trouble? And we see that sometimes when we communicate with a fleet manager and we tell them, hey, we need to see your driver. Please route them to a terminal or wherever that is we need to see them.
Sure.
They automatically go into a defense mode and think they're in trouble. And that's not always the case, right? So when we talk about culture, we want safety to be a place they can come to and know they can get support and they can get help with an issue. I mean, can we help them with the payroll problem? No, we can't help them with payroll. Can we help them with their additional miles if they're not getting enough miles? No, we can't give them more miles. But you know what? We can get them in touch with the right person that can, right? And let them have a conversation directly with whoever they need to talk to.
Hmm.
So we're willing to do that because when our phone rings, we don't know what's on the other side. It could be a major catastrophic heavy liability issue, it could be a truck on fire, it could be a fatality, it could be, hey, I bumped a fence. I backed up too far with my trailer. They told me to drop it over there and I hit the chain link fence. It could be
Right.
major, it could be minor. We don't know, right?
Yep.
So, we're here to support the driver and the contractors. That's our job, right? And we want to do that the best we can, right?
Hmm.
And so that's kind of, what we are as a culture. We get a bad reputation and a bad rap thinking we're something else, but we're really not, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Good. Well, you probably noticed me, Tim, looking down a little bit, and actually, it is because um, Mr. Randy Timms wanted to jump on here. So
Perfect.
yeah, let me take a second here and see if I can get him on. I know we're getting close to the end here.
That's
Right
fine.
after this, we'll do our Q&A.
So while you do that, I'll go over the saying you got on the screen there for
Yeah,
those
please,
looking.
please.
So when we talk about safety culture, and it's not just culture in the office, it's safety culture as a driver, right? And my theory is a safe driver is a compliant driver, and a compliant driver is a safe driver. And so it goes back to the three C's about being compliant, right? If you're exhibiting the behavior habits of being a compliant driver, you're going to be a safe driver,
Hmm.
right? It's just that simple.
Yep. Well, um, unfortunately, I don't know if I can bring him on. Um, Hang tight for me just one more second, Tim. Well, here, let's do this. I'll keep working on that. But let's move on. There's always a Q&A related to these episodes. So for anybody listening, for future episodes, you can always email us at townhall@drivewfx.com. Or reply to any of the emails, or if you see anything on social, you can comment, and we take those questions and then we feature them here on our town hall episode. So, Tim, will you go ahead and answer this first question for us from one of our contractors? They ask, can you please explain the quarterly safety bonus program?
Yeah, absolutely. So for those that have been here a while, remember the safety bonus used to pay out yearly. We changed that last year to pay out quarterly. That way you have a better opportunity to achieve that bonus more frequently, right? Than you would just wait until the end of the year by reaching the requirements every quarter. And really it is called a safety bonus, but actually, performance is in there as well. When we look at things like one of the minimum requirements is, as a solo driver, you have to do 32,500 miles. So that automatically puts a performance piece into it as well.
Mm-hmm.
As far as the other bonus qualifiers, you have to make sure you have no preventables that we talked about earlier. And also make sure you have no violations on a roadside inspection. We also talked about that as well. Those are the key factors. And then the middle of last month, we rolled out a new program that we rolled into the quarterly safety bonus, and that is our safety video training, right?
Okay.
All trucking companies or all companies should have a training base operation, right? Or a safety training programs per se. We are a partner with a company that provides those videos for us. Neil, one of our director of safeties, oversees those assignments and oversees the process to make sure those drivers are completing those videos. We rolled it out in the middle of last quarter, so it will not affect the quarter we just finished up. But Monday's a new month. It's a new quarter. You will be getting new quarterly assignments for that quarter.
Okay.
Though that video assignment for that safety program will be a requirement to apply to the quarterly safety bonus for that quarter, for the third quarter. And that will be a requirement as well. Some drivers may have not done those yet. Some drivers may not have seen some of those videos. Neil's been working with our Lytics camera system to monitor some behavior habits and doing some corrective action videos out. So
Right.
if a driver's seen those and they understand the format, that's how that would work.
And remind me of the platform again, for the training videos, the quarterly safety videos.
I think it's Syntex.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Good. I just wanted to make sure everybody had that name in their head. And of course, if anybody has any questions about the quarterly safety bonus program or the safety video training program, please, of course, email Tim's team at safety@drivewfx.com. So good answer there, Tim. Thank you.
Yep.
So moving on. Question two. One of our drivers asked, what is the winner's circle and how does it work? Now, you and I work very closely, Tim, on the winner's circle program. It's fantastic. I work out of the IWX office in Springfield. So, I haven't been able to get to every single one of the winner's circle presentations that we've had. But I was fortunate enough to get to our last one, where we were celebrating a few different drivers and contractors for over 1 million safe miles. And man, it was awesome. I mean, it was so great to be there, to see how we recognize those folks. And so, yeah, can you share a little bit about the Winter Circle?
Absolutely. the winner circle is just named that. It's the winner circle, right? Um, and we have three different levels of recognition on that: uh, silver, gold, and platinum. And when we rolled this program out as with the platinum drivers, is what we're recognizing first. And I think we're what, Michael, down to the last 11 on the platinum that'll go out. That list will go out pretty soon. But at the platinum level, it's 1,000,000 miles, 1,000,000 safe miles with Western Flyer Express. So there again, on average how many miles you run a year, do the math, you get to 1,000,000 miles, you're inducted into the winner circle at the platinum level.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a huge personal accomplishment for the drivers and contractors themselves, but it's also a huge accomplishment for us as a motor carrier. One, an honor to recognize the drivers who's put in that type of miles and time with us, right? That
Mm-hmm.
is a huge statement in itself saying, hey, this driver's been with us 8 to 10 years minimum of what it takes to get to that accomplishment. So that's huge to say that in itself, right?
Yeah, of course.
And and then, when we do that recognition at that, everybody in this organization comes together and recognizes that driver, from recruiting to accounting, right? To billing to, you know, our shop out here. We bring people from the shop in, all of operations, safety. Every department participates in honoring that drivers who and contractors who enter into that program. And like you said, Michael, that was the first one you were able to attend. And if you were impressed, then I think we're on the right track for that, right? To
Yep.
recognize those guys.
Yeah, absolutely. It was great. Those are special moments. They're remarkable milestones. Those safe miles, they're not easy, as we kind of talked about, right?
Right,
Having to what do they have to do, right? They have to be courteous, right? They got to be be compliant. The
right.
all the three C's they have to do
Yep.
to be able to get those safe miles. So yeah, it's fantastic to be a part of. So we got 3 minutes left, and we have question three here. So this is from one of our contractors. They asked, "Has the company looked at other ELD platforms?"
Yes, we have. We've looked at several different options on those ELD platforms. Some of them we liked, some of them we discarded pretty quick. Um, uh, some of them do things that other ones don't do. Um, they're really, you have to end up finding the one that works best for you, for us as a motor carrier. What
Hmm.
does it capture, right? And in today's technology world, right? Technology is so advanced. These platforms keep adding and adding and adding, right? We're in the world today of artificial intelligence, right? And
Sure.
it doesn't just, I mean, when we say artificial intelligence for computers and software and things it does there, they're putting that into ELD platforms. They're putting that into new camera platforms, right? Our camera system, in Lytics, they have other camera products out there that incorporate the artificial intelligence, and they have a little more self-coaching opportunities to it where they can communicate with the driver even in the ELD platform, right? I mean, our platform now will give a driver a 30-minute warning notification for an hours of service maximum set, right? If they're coming up within a break or a requirement within 30 minutes, they're given an audible notification. So there are
Yep.
things like that in the camera system we've looked at will do the same. We have not made a decision on what kind of platform we're looking at this time. We found a couple that we do like. And honestly, that answer for that direct answer is going to have to be going to um, our WTL leasing. You
Hmm.
know, they
Yep.
manage all of our assets and they own all of our assets. So they make those decisions. They just, out of respect, let us have a lot of input and let us manage some of the day-to-day platforms from an operations standpoint. It's not just safety, it's operations looks at them too, right?
Right.
Do they have the mobile comm system they need to communicate? Does it tie in with their current operating software and IT manage, through AS400? So
Hmm.
there's a lot of factors that have to go into it, not just being an ELD platform.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, thank you, Tim. I know we're at time. I was trying to get Randy to join, but I wasn't able to. I mean, obviously he's listening, but I couldn't get him on screen. But really, what he just wanted to impress upon everybody, is the importance of safety. I mean, really stress the importance of safety, being safe, and how it impacts every aspect of our business, which we touched on a little bit through this session. So just really want everybody to remember that, and everybody in the company, all of our drivers, all of our contractors, all of our employees play a significant role in safety. And so I think that's really important for everybody to remember. So,
Yeah.
Tim, I want to thank you very much for joining us for episode 4. Thanks again for all your work. Uh, I made the joke earlier to you that I feel a little bit safer having listened and
I
gone
don't
through
know
all
about
this
that.
going through all this information. So thank you very much for that. I really appreciate it. And for everybody who joined, thank you so much. I appreciate you above all else. Stay safe, and everybody have a good one. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Michael. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Tim.
Yes,
See ya.
sir.